Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas, Joe.
It's not Christmas yet. Let's go.
Close enough.
Let's go, Brandon. Show everybody your T-shirt, your sweatshirt shirt.
I saw this. It was for sale there.
For sale at what is?
Which camera? This one here. There we go.
Yeah.
You know, yeah.
A festive sweater.
Yeah, you need. Everyone needs a super ugly Christmas sweater, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So this is mine this year.
Yeah. It's very nice. And it's got
I'm not sure who Brandon is, but
Yeah.
I like the layout.
Yeah,
know,
and you just like the
pattern.
You like the words, yeah.
Yeah, and let's go. It's a bit of
it's positive. Absolutely.
Positive.
Absolutely. It's a positive message for Christmas. In these dark times, it's a positive message.
Yeah. Lord knows we can, use it. So
Yeah.
Merry Christmas to our peeps. Well, we'll say that at the end, don't we? We'll wish them all.
Yeah. Only
At the
at
moment, it's still the dystopia before Christmas.
It is.
Are we going to be
The
on a
nightmare-
lockdown
the
again?
nightmare before Christmas.
That's it. The nightmare before Christmas. There's going to be lockdowns again.
Who knows? It's like a lucky dip, It's a draw, like a lottery, People are hoping. Some people are hoping to, I think, to have a nice lockdown at Christmas, and that's the problem, That's the problem.
I know.
There's an unknown number of people out there who actually enjoy lockdowns. It gives them a sense of, secure. I mean, we've gone over this loads of times in previous shows about,
And we pondered their percentage.
Well, the lead up to it
it's
as
a
well.
large number.
Yeah, and the lead up to it over the past, 10, 15 years or whatever, conditioning of the population, I'm frequently reminded of those billboards or, signs particularly on the London transport network, but I think it was across most of the country, where you just have these signs on the tube, on the subway, or at bus stops and stuff like that. And it was just a big eye, and it said "Secure beneath the watchful eyes."
Yeah.
And people are getting those impressions from that all the time, and have been for, like I said, going back 10, 15 years. And, it's obviously government has long ago decided that works on people, in the sense of it feels that it's fulfilling its mandate. I mean, this is just without putting any nefarious connotations on it. It's fulfilling its mandate to convey a message to the people, or to instill in them a feeling of,
We've got your
you're
back.
safe. We're here. Don't worry. Mommy and daddy are here. You can go out and be in public, and we'll take care of the scary things, right?
Yeah.
Of course, if you look into whether or not the government had any part in creating the scary things, then the whole thing gets a bit more problematic, It's causing a problem and then causing to produce a solution, that pushes things in a particular direction. But yeah, so...
Well, security, I just want to add to that it was tied with the rollout of mass surveillance in public spaces in the United Kingdom.
Yeah.
I mean, it was, I think it's pretty much fact that for about a decade there, the UK was synonymous with being the most surveilled place per square meter of land, of public space anyway, on the earth. Not that it ever did anything, because I think I vaguely remember studies done with there any kind of correlation in drops in crime rates or anything like that? No. Or in being able to catch criminals or crimes in progress? No.
Yeah.
So it had a different purpose, and it was, like you say, it was probably tied with the message that was rare that it was expressly articulated. Secure beneath the watchful eyes, and literally have eyes on every street.
Yeah.
It wasn't the only one. It wasn't. There were also they dialed back on it because it kind of suggested snitching. But post 9/11, you had, if you see something, say something.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that was more American. Today it's full of it too, though. I've seen, especially in the UK, like public service announcements / billboards / advertising posts.
Mm-hmm.
With just
All
the
that.
most horrific COVID
nonsense, yeah.
The worst of it,
Yeah. Well, we've shown those in previous shows as well. That kind of propaganda. Just throw up that. It's useful. I don't know if, and the same thing was. That was that's the poster. I always want to put take away secure beneath the watchful eyes and just put in the words 1984 in that, because for some reason it reminds me of either some kind of parody or some kind of a commentary on the book 1984. You know what I mean?
Well,
as if someone was.
I have a guess as to why it reminds you of it, because whoever chose not so much the exact imagery, but the kind of the color scheme is kind of suggestive of an old school 40s, 50s imagination of what 1980s might look like.
Yeah.
You see? So it was kind of stylized on dystopian imagery.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Without a hint of irony.
Yeah, so that was all, obviously, that came out of that poster and others like it came out of, and other warnings from government or other, propaganda from government come out of the years of terrorism, right? So for us, it's difficult to disconnect terrorism with the whole COVID business in terms of the underlying dynamics and underlying themes of them, which is there's a deadly threat out there and government's here to protect you, and government exploiting that and using that and overusing that and exploiting the population, and for the purpose of controlling the population. Because as we've said many times on the show, people think that government is there to take care of them, but they're not. They're there to control them. Because if it's just about taking care of people, most people, generally speaking, in good times and normal times, take care of themselves, leading to a situation where government isn't really needed. And so control is much more important for governments, and so that's their mandate, is to control the population. But something has to happen. You need some kind of a crisis or some kind of an issue or some kind of a problem in society for government to, quote unquote, take care of people. But ultimately, it's controlling them, telling them what to do, where they should go, where they shouldn't go.
Yeah.
Well, the reason we use the term control is because it has a negative spin on it, right, rather than care for. But there's plenty of evidence that government aren't exactly benevolent actors in all of this. You know what I mean? And again, that comes down to your perspective, but each their own, I suppose.
Yeah. Well, it's additionally, okay, you're looking at it from the top down, but now maybe just turn it around from the bottom up. How many people out there don't have the internal software of their own that this constant barrage of here's what to think, here's how to behave, here's how to conceive of it, secure beneath the watchful eyes,
right, that
is actually there in place of something that is not there at all,
i.e. an ability to regulate their own lives and decide for themselves what they should and shouldn't do, and to assess risk in their lives and society themselves. Yeah, there's a lot of people like that. I mean, one good example, actually, I just came across it on, he's actually a blue checkmark guy on he's got 120,000 followers on Twitter. I don't know much about him because I only saw this video, a short video he made. You can throw it up there, Scotty, it's on Twitter. Brittle Star, blue checkmark guy. Let me see who he is. He's the internet's favorite dad. There you go. So he just became popular on Twitter or whatever. But here's a little video he made, and it speaks volumes about what we were just talking about.
I've just had my third shot. A booster, they call it. How many more are they going to make us get? Don't know, don't care. Because I, like you probably, understand there is a global pandemic, and people much, much smarter than you and me have decided this is the best plan of action to avoid lots more people dying or cluttering up hospital hallways. You and I, we're doing our part by getting one more little prick and not being one.
Bit of venom there.
I've just had my third shot.
From a bit of venom there from a Scaredy Guy. Obviously, he's fundamentally a Scaredy Guy. He wouldn't see himself as being a guy who's obviously afraid and concerned and needs external authority to tell him what to do when there's a problem in society.
Is he scared though?
Yeah, I mean, he can't come out with that attitude of listen, it's got venom in it against people who are not doing what the government tells them to do in this pandemic. And fundamentally behind that perspective that he's giving there is fear. I mean, the whole pandemic has caused a lot of fear in people. Well, the so-called pandemic has caused a lot of fear in people, and has elicited all the reactions we have seen, the ones that we don't think are very positive. They're all fear-based, basically. And government continues to this day, as we were just starting the show with, to try and elicit that kind of fear in the population. And there's a certain section of the population that they can easily do that in and provoke those kind of responses. But the problem is that there's another section of the population who are just like, listen, I'm an adult. I don't need you. Go away. Get out of my face. Basically, get out of my life.
But they have no representation,
Right.
or little.
Right. Well, how can they? In the kind of governments that are around the world today, those governments are there to, like we said, control people's lives, lord it over people, tell them what to do. That's their job description. If they don't have something that justifies them telling people what to do, you need to do this or else, then what are they there for?
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And they feel that themselves, so it is job justification, and that's even just the most banal explanation for it, or angle to it, because obviously you could have quite a lot of them who actually enjoy that kind of control as well. Enjoy turning the screws on people and watching people react,
I thought he enjoyed making that video. He
didn't
feel like he was doing his part for the war, as in World War II.
Yeah.
He looked like,
Yeah.
I just made a joke out of this at your expense.
Yeah. But what I mean is, like, for him
All
to
the while
do that,
believing he's righteous.
yeah. But for him to do that and be sincere about it, he has to have some kind of baseline fear-based response to and belief in the government claims that that this is a deadly pandemic. And on the point, if you throw up the population, JPEG Scotty, this is just a basic graph. You can get it anywhere from many different sources. But this current world population from this year, basically the growth in the world population this year, and it grew by 78 million.
I saw that, yeah.
That's the year, 2 years, over the period of 2 years. It grew last year as well, 2020 and 2021. That's your deadly pandemic. I know that's taking the broad picture, the big picture analysis of it, but that's one valid way to look at it, is that if you have had a deadly global pandemic, surely you would see maybe could you? Is it too much to expect?
I threw that at a relative last year.
Yeah.
And did you know what he threw back at me?
What?
Yeah, but they'd all be dead if we hadn't done this.
They would all be dead if we had.
Those plus another X 100 million would be dead if the government had not.
If the government hadn't locked down and all that kind of stuff, despite the fact that there's no evidence that lockdowns or masks have any significant impact on the transmission of respiratory viruses.
I may or may not have come back with that, at which point his response would have been, no, the evidence is they're still alive.
But
that's how they see it, Joe. I'm telling you.
The evidence that it works is that they're still... But that's making a claim based on no evidence that they would have died. Just saying they would have died. You have no evidence. He has no evidence to back that up. That's a supposition, or that's a...
belief.
But look, when you're dealing with people who just are repeating government talking points like that, there's no point in talking to them. We're not talking like someone like that is apples and oranges. It's like they're two separate conceptions and perspectives and attitudes towards the world and how to understand it. So you get two people like that talking to each other, it's just like, why bother? It's pointless.
Exactly.
Really,
you have to go your separate way, because they will always claim, like that guy in the video claims, well, as my allies, he said, there are people smarter than me who made this decision.
There's a lot smarter than us.
Smarter than us.
All of us. He includes all of us, you and me as well. So all these people we should be listening to them because they're smarter than us. Now, of course, he's making an assumption there that we would agree with him that the people who are making these statements are smarter than us. Certainly, we're not saying we're super smart or we're geniuses or anything like that, but we do have an ability to figure things out and, risk assessment and make judicious decisions based on the way the world is and what's happening in the world and take responsibility for ourselves. But
it's a BS argument, because what he doesn't know, because it's been excised from his quote unquote infosphere, is that for every one scientist or doctor who is saying X, its opposite picture is stated clearly by their opponents in Y group. But they're just simply censored or fired or otherwise shut up or cowed into not saying anything.
Yeah. Well, to understand who he means by smart people and us, like people, there's smarter people than us who have made these decisions, who know what's going on, we should just follow them. It's probably be useful to look at who the government thinks or what the way the government thinks that its information is best transmitted to the population, and get an idea of what it thinks the intelligence level of the population is, right? So you throw up celebs there, Scotty. This is just a few. There's lots more, but there are a few headlines for over the past year or so, up until fairly recently. Government to spend 36k on Love Island reality stars and celebrities to promote NHS test and trace. The NHS to enlist sensible celebrities to persuade people to take COVID vaccine. The White House is enlisting pop stars, heavily followed influencers to endorse COVID vaccines, and $1,000 cash payments and a TikTok influencer army are part of the campaign to get people vaccinated. So
Sock puppets, literally.
so this is what the government thinks is needed in order to convey the really important information to the population. So that gives you an idea of what it thinks the level of the average person that it's targeting is at. So based on that, based on the fact that Kim Kardashian and people like that are the ones who I'm meant to be looking at and taking information about vaccines or not vaccines, maybe that's the level of, getting back to that guy who made the video, that's us and them, right? Well, at the very least, I can't say I'm like smarter than scientists and all that kind of stuff, but I'm certainly smarter than Kim Kardashian and TikTok influencers. So
I think Kardashian's COVID skeptic, but point taken, there are many others.
well, okay, she had a little bit COVID.
Yeah.
Well, which one?
Well, Ariana Grande.
Ariana Grande is a good
just put out a
example.
pop song.
Don't do
I'm
it.
just checking it now.
Are
Is
you
it
gonna do
Christmas #1 in the US?
Oh, Jesus Christ.
The
I watched that.
duet with
That douchebag.
that comedian Jimmy Fallon.
Yeah.
It was a masked Christmas. I don't know. if
We're
it's
not
number
playing
one.
it. I'm sorry. You'll have
I'm
to
not
look at it
playing it.
yourself.
No, it's catchy though.
Ah, come on.
It is catchy.
That's because it's a Wham song.
Yeah, it's not there. It's not original. Of course not. They can't really do anything original.
Yeah, so my point is I'm not numbering myself like that guy would amongst the kind of
Right.
people who get their advice, who
From-
need someone like a TikTok influencer or Ariana Grande to tell them what to do. If I'm not in that category. There obviously must be people out there. The government has decided, as we just saw in those headlines, the government has decided that there's a lot of people out there who are in the category where they would put people like Ariana Grande or TikTok influencers as smart people who you should listen to. I'm not in that category. I'm just saying. I just want to clarify. I'm not in that category. I don't think I need to get advice from those kinds of people. So clearly, like, it gets back to the idea of there being a division amongst the population here, and never the twain shall meet, right? It's an insoluble problem, effectively. And we're seeing it.
Well, the way things are going, they might be. It looks like they're going to. I mean, seriously, they're going all in. It's going to be a meeting of force,
You reckon?
2022. I think so. Yeah.
I think if
So
they-
far, it's mostly digital in nature. You get kicked off here, you get censored there, you lose a bit of income there, or you lose your job outright, economic or digital. But yeah, there's horrible stories about court cases where there's two parents, spouses, and the rights to access for a child.
Yeah.
The one who's quote unquote anti-vax has all rights withheld pending the vaccination. Stuff like that's coming down.
Yeah. Well, yes, I don't disagree with you that that's definitely the track they're on. Obviously, we've seen in Austria, vaccine mandates, a kind of vaccine mandate in Germany, or at least harsh measures against unvaccinated people. In Holland has just recently, past few days, announced a kind of pretty much a traditional Christmas lockdown, like as in traditional lockdown as in 2020 lockdown. All essential businesses closed, kind of only go out once a day, all that kind of stuff. But
And there's somewhere, isn't there, where you have to be back by 8? Is that Ireland?
that's Ireland, where over the whole Christmas period, they just announced it a few days ago, over the whole Christmas period, bars and restaurants and whatever else, those type of eatery establishments, drinking establishments of any description, closed at 8 o'clock. They wanted to do it,
But that's for everyone, both vaxxed and unvaxxed.
everybody.
Yeah.
Over Christmas, 8 o'clock, it's not really workable, is it? I mean, it's a bit sadistic, you know what I mean? It's like telling you, okay, because initially they were their scientific advisory group inside the government supposedly, or outside the government probably, or above the government perhaps, told them 5 o'clock. Lockdown at 5 o'clock, which just cancels Christmas, right? No, it's not a lockdown. We're just closing all the bars and restaurants at 5 o'clock. Oh, okay. So they said, no, we'll make a concession, 8 o'clock, which doesn't really make much difference, you know. But, and then the UK, yeah.
Maybe I should walk that back then. You think there's no, in the future, yeah, it's not that there will come physically. Like so far, the physical clashes have been where police break up protests and there's violence at demos.
Yeah.
But that involves you actually sticking your head above the parapet and challenging it.
Right.
Whereas what I was suggesting was they would actually start to go beyond these measures and start to enforce them. Well, maybe
I think
not. Maybe it still requires voluntary
I think
participation.
that based on what they've done over the past couple of years and the impacts it's had on people worldwide, particularly in the Western world, but pretty much worldwide, and the impact it's had on the economy and what they're doing with the economy, with the whole, like we talked in previous shows about the greening of the economy and energy prices as a result of them relying too much on renewables and energy prices spiking because there isn't enough gas and coal and stuff that they're trying to phase out. Based on them doing that, if they push that further with really going towards more and more mandates, they're going to break something.
Right.
And actually, if you just throw up that article, Scotty, I just sent you on Reuters as an example, truckers, supposedly there's word that Canadian government is going to mandate, which they haven't done so far, mandate.
Oh, I checked. They have.
Have they announced it already?
Yeah. Yes.
In the new year, yes. So they've announced it for some time in the
Yeah.
new year. And truckers are on Twitter and stuff saying, listen,
We're
there's
not,
a lot of us who are not going to take this and we're going to basically go on strike. Now, if you there's a lot of obviously trucker transport over across the US border, and that's going to be a big issue in terms of the supply chain for Canada, you know, at least because Canada gets a lot of its, you know.
The Canadian Trucking Alliance estimates that between 15 and 30,000 truckers will either not be delivering goods or will instead be doing it so on the black market. They'll try to continue work, but go around controls.
I think one of the stipulations was that for, especially for truckers crossing the border.
Yes.
So they would basically
beginning there.
Yeah.
But then there's an addendum where they want to roll on to the next, which is between provinces in Canada.
Right.
But it's the same in the US. But Biden is the truckers in the US.
Yeah.
By February. They're watching how Canada goes, and then by February it's supposed to be the US. International travel, so that's truckers crossing north and southern borders. But then there's it's not passed yet, but there's another package coming behind that, which is similar to Canada, where you go across straight state lines. Truckers there will have the vax mandate slapped on them too. Yeah. And they'll walk away. We've seen that already. I don't think it's subjective to suggest that, to speculate that they're going to walk away from it.
There was one trucker guy who was talking about this, and he was saying, a Canadian guy who was saying, listen, all it'll take will be about 15% of the trucker truck drivers basically in Canada to say, take your vaccine mandate and shove it and basically just stop work. That'll have serious consequences for the supply chain and food in stores and all sorts of commodities for Canadians. So that's the kind of thing. I mean, whenever I talk about them breaking something with these, if they push that too far, that there's a sizable enough percentage of the population. It depends on the country. It's different in different countries, but there's a sizable enough percentage of the population in every country, I think, that were at this point, if they haven't got vaccinated, they're not doing it. Doesn't matter how much scare tactics they throw out there about Omicron and blah blah blah. They're not doing it. Right. And if they try and turn the screw on those people and target them directly and make their life difficult specifically rather than a general statement or a general fear-mongering or that kind of pressure, then those people will, they'll just resist. They'll walk out. They'll stop working because they'll target people's jobs first and foremost to try and target them specifically, and people will just walk away.
So the broad strategy remains just to annoy people into getting it.
Yeah.
And in the meantime, other things will overtake the issue of the vaccines, the mandating of them,
Yeah.
specifically the economic consequences
Right.
of coercing, well, no, firing and or people just walking away from their
And the
jobs.
economic consequences of like last year and shutting down large parts of the global economy. Well, not large parts, but parts of the global economy and throwing a monkey wrench in the works of the global economy. I mean, there's still those effects are still kind of to be felt in a certain sense. They're enduring. Like one aspect is there's a labor shortage. So many different aspects to this in terms of what they've done and the effects of government policies over the past 2 years on the global economy. One of them is we don't have. I think we talked about it in previous shows about the stats of people who have just left their jobs.
Yeah.
The whole depressive attitude of the whole so-called pandemic had on people, especially people who are maybe in their 50s, not maybe 10 years, whatever, are thinking about
Yeah.
retirement. They walked away early.
Anyone who could took it early.
But of course, they spin that in the US. They spin that as saying the job market's really robust because there's lots of jobs out there, and it's like, yeah, there's lots of jobs out there because a bunch of people left their jobs early, which means, well, who's filling those jobs? You know what I mean? There's all sorts of. It's obviously a very complex system, the entire global economy, and there's all sorts of different little areas within it that are a problem right now, and they're being patched over effectively. They're still hobbling along to a large extent, but if they do more and they push it further, there is a breaking point.
You remember over the last weeks, we're keeping an eye on the Biden regime's mandate for all employees of private companies over 100 in number, with 100 or more workers. Now, that was pushed to OSHA, the Occupational Health and Safety Agency of the United States government.
Mm-hmm.
Then it was bounced from court to court. The latest is that the Sixth Circuit Court stayed the motion of the Fifth Appellate Court, so it's back on.
Right.
It's back. Initially, we thought, yeah, but no, it's back. It's OSHA, the government agency, will begin fining businesses that violate the federal vaccine mandate on January 10th.
Yeah.
That's going to affect everything.
Yeah. Something like 2/3 of the U.S. workforce, basically. I mean, a lot of businesses already have, on a case-by-case basis, have imposed some kind of vaccine mandates. And a lot of people in the U.S. are vaccinated, but still, there's still a sizable percentage that aren't. And why aren't they? You know what I mean? At this point, after the repeated onslaughts of pressuring and manipulation and fear to try and get those people to get vaccinated, if they're not vaccinated at this point, they're not doing it. Especially with, people have still some ability to read the situation. The whole Omicron thing, where it's very clear, anybody who looks a little bit, has that independent thought, isn't just looking to Tony Fauci to tell them what's going on, but looks into it themselves, looks at other sources of information, even official sources of information in the case of Omicron from South Africa, that all of the evidence at 4 or 5 weeks into its first appearance that it's very mild, it gives you a bit of a cold, whatever. Sure, it's more contagious, but so's the cold, so big deal. So as that kind of thing continues and people who can do their own research see more and more evidence that they're right to continue to resist getting a vaccine or resist the fear mongering, it's not gonna change, And yeah, so I agree with what you're saying, that the government will not like that and try and force more people to get vaccinated. And of course, it allows them to keep it going, blaming the vaccinated on the continued presence of any variant or whatever, blah, blah, blah. But it's a big joke. I mean, we're kind of repeating ourselves over and over again here on these shows. But I suppose we have to, that the whole thing really has been...
A year ago, Biden specifically said there would be no vaccine mandates.
Yeah. Well,
early December.
A lot of them did that, yeah. A lot of governments in a lot of countries said that at some point, that it's not what we do, it's not the kind of way we live in this society, it's not policy, and then they just... And the strange thing is that obviously as a virus propagates throughout society and mutates, it gets less efficient, less dangerous. That's the same true for pretty much all viruses as they spread and interact with human immune systems, and they become less dangerous. But so it's weird that as time progressed and that process continued of the virus becoming weaker and weaker, government started to increase the the messaging about its severity and increase the severe measures to do something about it. It's like, at what point do people go, there's something else
There's something else.
going on here?
Yeah.
And they can't put their finger on it, but it's right in front of their faces. It's like, and it's that government is corrupt and enjoys controlling and manipulating people and having, enjoys job justification. Basically, it needs job justification. It needs, they all need a reason to exist, basically, as your leaders and as your politicians, you know, and they need a crisis.
And that's a good place to segue into the story from the UK last week, where the British government passed a law in Parliament after all of its talk about no vaccine passports. No, we're British. We're British. No papers,
Stiff
please.
upper lip.
No papers, please. That's what Nazis do, indeed. And they said stuff to that effect, months ago. Now, last week, COVID passports, mandatory face masks in public or something.
In close spaces.
And there was a Tory rebellion in the Parliament, so it relied on Labour opposition support to get that passed. In the midst of that, can you put up what I sent you, Scotty? It's that's the wrong one. That's a related story, actually, I want to talk about as well. The Spectator article I have in mind is from the editor of the Spectator, the UK version, where he got into a chat with none other than the head of SAGE in the UK. So the editor is Fraser Nelson. He wrote a column about it after. This is his article. My Twitter conversation with the chairman of the SAGE COVID Modelling Committee. So this is basically the group that, in quote, advises the British government on what it should and shouldn't do throughout this whole nonsense. So the backstory is that last weekend, this man here, Professor Graham Medley, published a study on Omicron, making the case for more restrictions. Against all evidence, his model assumed that the Omicron variant is just as dangerous as Delta. Mm-hmm. But if you adjust for this factor, as one JP Morgan report did in a note sent around to its high-profile clients, just that factor where you say, well, actually, what if you plug into this model this man uses and say Omicron is less deadly than Delta, then the model spits out that hospital bed occupancy this coming January will be just 1/3 its level it was a year ago. So Fraser Nelson asked this man, Medley, it's embedded in here. Once you scroll down, he has a screen capture of this conversation. Let's see. Okay. I'll scroll down a bit more to the second one. Okay, here. I'll go to the top of that one there. Okay, so the journalist asked the head of SAGE, what about in this other scenario, the one modeled by JP Morgan, where no further restrictions would be needed, so harm to economy and society might be averted? Can I ask why you didn't think this less alarming scenario was worth including in your report to the government? And he replies, second sentence, decision makers are generally only interested in situations where decisions have to be made. Okay, that's a non-answer kind of. Nelson responds, why would you not, for completeness, add the scenario where Omicron is less virulent and therefore more restrictions are not needed? Medley responds, decision makers don't have to decide if nothing happens. Okay, so Nelson says, scroll down. So you exclusively model bad outcomes that require restrictions and omit just as likely outcomes that would not require restrictions. And he basically says, well, yeah, We generally model what we are asked to model.
Yeah.
There we are. Okay. There is a dialogue in which policy teams, i.e. the government, discuss with us, the modelers, what they need to inform their policy. So Nelson says, okay, right, so you were asked to model bad Omicron outcomes and make no comment as to the probability. Scroll down, that's some other commentary. His last word on it was, we modeled the scenarios that are useful to decisions.
It's such Orwellian kind of political doublespeak. You know what I mean? It's so vague, but it's clear what he's saying there, which is that we model scenarios that are useful to decisions. And go back up a little bit, Scotty. Okay, stop. We generally model what we are asked to model. This is a dialogue in which policy teams discuss with modelers what they need to inform their policy. Okay, so what's your policy? The question there should have been, what's your policy? To inform your policy. Our policy, the answer might have been, our policy, or probably was, our policy is that this is a deadly pandemic and we need to keep control of the situation, keep control of the people. So we ask for information that informs that pre-formed policy. Yeah. It's like back to Iraq's weapons of mass destruction and Tony Blair fixing the facts around the policies. This has been a mainstay of politics, especially in the whole world really, but in the West most particularly, probably for decades, where maybe forever, you know what I mean, as far as modern political history is concerned, where politicians have a plan, have an idea, and it goes back to the idea of, you know, people know the movie V for Vendetta. I've seen where the Chancellor's saying, I want everybody to know why they need us. And it's a fear, like I've been saying, it's a consistent fear in the background of politicians, or a need, you could certain say that you could say that provokes a certain fear sometimes that they won't be needed anymore, which means that their job is no longer required. You know, so these people are all the time trying to justify their own jobs. Why? Because their jobs give them a lot of perks, a lot of benefits. Yeah. Whenever they leave politics, they get straight into a really high-paid job, usually, all the connections they've made. So these people need the people to need them.
Yeah.
And for that to happen, they need a crisis, or they're always looking for some kind of a crisis. They're always talking up. Sometimes one comes along and it's good luck or whatever, but a lot of times they're manufacturing it in one way or another. And it's all designed towards that dual, kind of mutually, compatible, those mutually compatible ideas of the people needing us to look after them and us needing to find something that justifies us looking after the people. Because at some point, in theory, in really good times, people wouldn't need us at all, or need very stripped down government, very, very little government. I mean, what does it really need? In good times, what do you need government for? Just to do a few, you know.
And Nelson, bless him, he asked him in 4 different ways.
Yeah,
and
trying to get it out.
And still couldn't get an answer. But we can see that Medley gave it away. Mm-hmm. So he reframes the question and he says, but okay, I get what you're saying. So the government needs to be able to make a decision. So why didn't you present them with the 2 scenarios so they could decide between them? And Medley's response was like, yeah, but that other scenario, quote, doesn't inform anything.
It doesn't.
Decision makers don't have to decide.
Yeah,
if
there's nothing for us to do.
If nothing happens, I can make a decision.
What he means by that is there's nothing for us to do.
But they could.
Making a decision is there's nothing for us to do.
To normal people like Nelson. Well, he's thinking, yeah, but they could have decided to lift restrictions or to not add additional ones. Right. And Medley's like, no, but if I told them that, they wouldn't be able to add things. Right. A decision for the government is to do more restrictions.
Of course.
Only. That's all that exists.
And why? Because it continues the crisis and continues the justification for big government, for more and more people in government, more and more positions. A COVID czar, you know, a pandemic czar,
a vaccine
czar. You know what I mean? You can fill it up, and you're pulling money from the public purse, from people's taxes to feed those greedy Persians.
Politics.
What was the name of the guy who's talking to him? You say he's the political editor over there?
He's the editor of The Spectator UK, Fraser Nelson.
Yeah. Well, you know, what's her name? A couple of weeks ago, Allegra Stratton.
Yes.
Did we cover that at the time?
Yeah, the lockdown parties in Downing Street this time last year.
Right, and her coming out. Did we play the video, actually, of her?
Chuckling?
Yeah.
No.
Just throw that one up there, Scotty. Because anyway, this Allegra Stratton, she's a supposed UK government spokesperson, but she never gave any press conferences because that was going to happen at some point. Because she just got the job this year and she was gearing up to give her first press conference or something after like 8 months in the job, and this was a couple of weeks ago. She is in this video having a trial run with members of the government, government ministers or whatever government who are standing in as fake journalists or pretend journalists,
that's what it was.
throwing questions at her,
Right.
to try and see what kind of, giving her a test to see if she said the right thing now. So that's why there's a kind of jovial aspect to it. But just to tell you, she's actually the reason the Spectator seems to be well connected, the Spectator magazine, because James Forsyth is her husband, and James Forsyth is the political editor of the Spectator,
right.
And he's married to her, and she was a UK government spokesperson. Just go ahead there, Scotty.
Before Christmas, as millions were cancelling plans, was Downing Street still full of festive cheer. Tonight, ITV News has fresh evidence that a party may have taken place in the very building that had just proclaimed them banned last year. In a rehearsal on the 22nd of December, the Prime Minister's then spokesperson, Allegra Stratton, is practising for the televised press briefings she'd been planning to host.
Anybody have any questions today?
She's answering mock questions posed by senior Downing Street staff acting as journalists. They include this one from Ed Oldfield, an advisor to the Prime Minister.
I've just seen reports on Twitter that there was a Downing Street Christmas party on Friday night. Do you recognise those reports?
I went home. Hold on.
Would the Prime Minister condone having a Christmas?
What's the answer?
I don't know.
It wasn't a party, it was cheese and wine.
Just be clear, it's not.
Is cheese and wine all right?
No.
It was a business meeting.
I'm joking.
It is recorded. This fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
That recording is the
Anyway,
first
stop it
time
there.
Downing Street staff have been...
That's kind of old news, but apparently she resigned. Nobody else resigned, but they're all having parties while they told everybody that parties were literally banned. You're not allowed to have any Christmas parties. Well, we'll have some parties. So obviously we don't take this seriously. It's a joke, and they're all having a good laugh about it, and how she's going to, present it to the public. If the journalists in the press conference ask her these questions, how she's going to answer them properly. But so it came out. Somebody kind of leaked this video, and but apparently there's more, because that was just part of that session of rehearsing possible journalistic questions, and there's claims that there's more, and there's more video of the rest of that where she's asked questions about Boris Johnson's mistresses and about his love children.
Right.
So that supposedly is to come out, and
I've been through about 5 or 6, by the way.
And he can't keep it in his pants. And that's from a couple of weeks ago, and it was a couple of weeks ago, just right around that time, that Omicron, as far as the UK government and particularly was concerned, went super serious. I mean, right on the heels of that story he obviously got asked about it here and there, but he just dismissed it as, well, I'm going to look into this and blah, 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 and everything was fine. Just brushed it off and said, but Omicron's deadly and we all need to lock down for Christmas. So it's like, I mean, this threatened, that kind of thing threatens public faith in the government.
Yeah.
So what does government do in response? Well, it tries to scare the people back into having faith in them.
Yes. But the Omicron is the gift that gave everywhere simultaneously.
Yeah.
Like, you're not suggesting, like...
No. It came out of South Africa.
Overplayed it.
Well, it wasn't a gift.
Just for British gain. It was overplayed. It's being simultaneously overplayed everywhere.
Of course. They're all because they're all on the same page, right? Government is the same.
So the timing was
everywhere.
good for...
Yeah, for sure.
Boris.
Although, when it first came out, the appropriate response to it with the data out of South Africa was this was a nothing burger. It's basically like the cold. This virus has mutated into something that other coronaviruses that have been around since the 1960s are, which is the cold. They give you symptoms of the common cold. That's what Omicron and this virus now actually does. It's the cold. Just so everybody knows, everything that's happening right now and will happen over the next few months is being done on the basis of the the cold circulating in a population anywhere in the world. That's it. I mean, literally. I mean, you could argue that it's before that it was the flu, but we've been over that in many different ways with all the data to support that contention. And it doesn't matter. We come back to the idea of there's some people going to see it for what it is, which is that, and there's a lot of other people who are, well, they're suffering from sunk cost fallacy, I suppose. Whenever you believe a lie and then take action on it in the sense of getting a vaccine, well, that's kind of signaling hard evidence to yourself that this is a serious pandemic. I believe that this was a serious, deadly pandemic because I had to get 3 vaccines and counting in order to deal with it. Otherwise, I'd be dead. I mean, it's all people can believe that if they want.
Yeah.
But the fact of the matter is, for the vast majority of people, that's not true and never was true. As we've been over multiple times, this virus, from the beginning and as it progressed, at the worst of it, it was dangerous only to a very, very tiny percentage of the population, in the same way the flu is, and in a similar way to the flu is. And that's all. That's all there is to it. I mean, you can sum it up in that way, but then you look at the whole situation, you go, how did something as simple as that produce what we've experienced over the past 2 years? Well, look at government. Government is the one who has done everything that has happened over the past 2 years. And if government crashes the economy, the global economy, and ushers in vastly more chaos and suffering than anything we've seen to date, then, well, was it on purpose? Was it the intention?
I don't know how much intelligence to give them for the foresight of any of this leading to somewhere coherent.
No, I wouldn't say a grand plan, at least not amongst those kind of people, but certainly they're just reacting on their own natures, which is greed, corruption, etc. And they'll take any crisis and try and amplify it for their own benefit and to the detriment of the population. Government doesn't care about you. Can we say that? No, we can't say that. Sorry, you're not allowed to say that, are you? You're not allowed to say the government doesn't care about you.
Oh, certainly you can.
Will anybody believe it? Some people. Will a lot of people not believe it?
I think most people would.
Would be happy to think the government doesn't care about you?
Yeah.
And by government, I mean scientists.
Yeah,
the
although
whole thing.
most would go with their fears rather than.
But I think there has to be an underlying belief that government does care about us, that's why this is all happening. Government, scientists, all the people, because there's not a lot of separation between government and scientists over the past couple of years. They've kind of merged, the scientists are telling government is taking, data from scientists, so they're all part of the governing elite who are, well, they have to care for us, how could you possibly suggest anything else, you know what I mean?
Yeah, here's a scary image from Washington this week. It's a very short video. Scotty, can you put this up? On it, you'll see Fauci, head of NIH, and Rochelle Walensky, head of CDC, on screen in the background. Okay, go ahead and play it.
Yeah.
For the unvaccinated, you're looking at a winter of severe illness and death. For yourselves, your families, and the hospitals you may soon overwhelm.
That's it. It's a
For
short
the
clip.
unvaccinated.
But obviously it was an hour-long presentation or something. That's the COVID-19 response. That's the government.
There's the government.
Forget
right
Biden. He's not even. He's not relevant. These are your rulers now. These are technocrats. 2 of them are familiar to you by now. The ones in the background. The one before I never heard of, but he is telling you how it's going to be. You are going to die this winter, if you do not get vaccinated.
Yep. Which is not true.
I know.
Somebody has to say it.
It's like
not
crazy.
So,
Just bald-faced. But he's got all the authority of, well, it's imagined. It's not legal authority, but this is how government is. It's, I don't know, at what point does mildly dystopian become just full-on dystopian?
but it's been normalized, right? People have gone with it. They've given up their power, their free will. They've accepted the lie. They don't question it. They accept. Again, it comes back to the idea that they have to believe that government is doing this in their own best interest, that government is caring for them. There's a fundamental belief that government cares for me. Otherwise, why would I go along with it? If I had any conception that government was doing this out of some kind of ulterior motives or whatever, and it wasn't in my best interest, I would not be doing it. They have to believe that it's for my best interest, you know. And they'll accept that. They'll accept any kind of dystopian, totalitarian kind of configuration of faces on a screen passing out orders, as long as they continue to believe that government this is caring government, basically, the caring face of government.
Yeah.
If you throw up that, this is just Fauci. We can't. I know it's Christmas and all. We don't want to ruin your Christmas, but here's the little gnome, a little evil little gnome. I wish you'd put I wish you would put on a pair of like antlers or something, or a Santa hat or something at least. This time of year, you know, he would look so funny, wouldn't he? Anyway, this is him about, well, it says it in the description, but you can just listen to him say it. It's crazy.
They were suggesting that there really isn't much of a need for a mask on an airplane. Are we going to get to the point where we won't have to wear masks on airplanes?
I don't think so. I think when you're dealing with a closed space, even though the filtration is good, that you want to go that extra step.
Yep. So we can construe that as never again. So forever.
Yeah.
This is forever. And what blows my mind is that there are people out there who would hear that and that similar concept of the new normal, and this is going to be for the foreseeable future, possibly for the rest of your life, depending on what age you are, or no matter what age you are, maybe.
Yeah.
That this is going to be forever, and how anybody can take that as being sincere or based in any kind of science, where people like Fauci can say that forever, now continuing going forward for the rest of everyone's lives, you have to wear a mask on a plane. What's the science behind? Where's the science that says a coronavirus is going to remain a threat forever? Is that what previous coronaviruses have done? No. Is that what previous other similar respiratory viruses have done? No. So why is it they talking like that about this one? I mean, I don't know. I mean, we and anybody else can amass massive amounts of evidence that all point to this one answer. This is not about public health. It's about controlling you, and they're enjoying controlling you. And it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
No matter how much evidence you marshal, hard evidence that would leave any rational person in no doubt, or as little doubt as possible, that that's what it's about. It's not about public health. Still, they disbelieve. Because they don't want to believe that, because it's a scary proposition. Well, fair enough.
Yeah. I don't know what to say. Last week, Fauci on CNN explained that Omicron is causing less hospitalizations.
Right.
Last week, the CDC reported, quote, most Omicron cases in the US have been mild.
Right.
And most people were vaccinated.
Right. So, yeah. So what's that again? It's all this double speak and stuff. Like, I mean,
but then
like
CNN reports that Pfizer's about to roll out a triple jab.
Yeah, because they're going to
for
make
anyone over 2.
Because they're going to make a lot of money from it, right? I mean, are we allowed to say that companies that market a product, when they see an opportunity to mass market the product,
but who is the company and who is Fauci? Where does the company and Fauci end?
Well, yeah, exactly.
Fauci,
so two of them together.
Like Dr. Scott, another headline, Dr. Scott Gottlieb, a Pfizer board member, time is running out to get a COVID booster as Omicron looms. Gottlieb was the head of the FDA for 10 years.
Yeah. Yeah, there's no difference between them. In some countries, 85% of the population vaccinated. We seem to be, according to the government, we're worse off than we were a year ago when nobody was vaccinated.
Yeah.
So does that mean vaccines don't work? Or does
No, it means the unvaccinated are evil. Apparently, that's the message I'm getting.
But maybe vaccines do work, but they just stop people from dying. Like the person you were talking to last year said, no, we would all be dead if we didn't have vaccines. It doesn't mean that the vaccines are going to just get rid of the virus. The whole thing can keep going and have all sorts of variants, but at least the more and more people are vaccinated, the less chances you have of dying. So we need regular boosters, right? Every 3 months now they're talking about. But has that ever happened with any other any other virus or vaccine, we need to get it every 3 months. The flu vaccine once a year if you want it. Surely that suggests there's something not very good or efficient, at least in terms of previous vaccines, about this particular vaccine. It doesn't work very well. Is that because of the virus? Is that because of the vaccine? They would say it's because of the virus, right?
Yes.
Because there's these mutations, and they talk about Omicron. Oh, maybe Omicron can evade the vaccine, but it causes much milder symptoms. So do you need the vaccine if it causes much milder symptoms? Who needs the vaccine? That's the big question for me all along. Who needs it?
Maybe we want to play this.
Yeah.
This one of Fauci on CNN, because he himself suggests that the vaccines absolutely don't work. This is why I think stupidity is a big part of this.
Mm-hmm.
This guy at the internet's most favorite dad.
Yeah, him.
When he claimed there are people smarter than us.
Yeah.
And he was thinking of Fauci.
Yeah.
Well, this is Fauci. How smart is this guy when he says this? It's the last question and answer from CNN. A CNN interview he gave this week.
Dr. Paul Offit, who I know you know, he's on the FDA Advisor Committee. He was on the show last week, and he made a point, which is, he's not alone in this, that there's a possibility that Omicron takes over Delta in this country, more transmissible, but causing less severe illness. And I know it's early in this, so we don't want to get ahead of where the data is, but is that a possible outcome here, that Omicron becomes dominant, but there's an advantage in that it's less dangerous?
That is a possibility, but let me give you the details about where we get those data, mostly from South Africa. So in South Africa, they're getting a very, very pronounced spread in almost a vertical spike of infection. And yet, when you look at the early data, it does appear that there is a diminution in the severity as expressed by hospitalization. The real question is that an inherent diminution of virulence of the virus? Or is it because there are so many people in the population who have already been infected and now have residual post-infection immunity, which is not protecting them from getting infected, but is protecting them from getting severe disease? Whatever it is, the disease seems to be less severe, whether it's inherently less pathogenic as a virus or whether there's more protection in the community. We're just going to have to see when it comes in the United States. And for sure, Jim, it is going to be dominant in the United States, given its doubling time.
Thanks, Scotty.
So natural.
He just made the case for ending all this shit right now.
Mm-hmm. But
because South Africa has a vaccine uptake of 36%.
Right.
So it's a naturally immune population. He just made the case for ending this today.
Exactly. But that's what I've been saying as well. That there's all sorts of competing.
He's so stupid he doesn't realize that he just did that.
Yeah.
And he was making that point to try and get because he saw they have a cunning intellect where they go. He saw what the CNN guy was angling at.
I see where you're going.
So if Omicron becomes dominant, hey shit, this thing has just viraled out, evolved, devolved naturally, and we're all cool now. It's just cold like. And he goes, yeah, but there's something in the details. Let me tell you about the details. The diminution of it doesn't necessarily mean. And then he ends up saying exactly what.
Yeah.
Maybe he just doesn't have the awareness of what he just said.
Well, I don't know, or he's confident. I mean, he tries to be balanced, but he's obviously not because he's got massive conflicts of interest and stuff in terms of owning patents on vaccines and all that kind of stuff. But that's what I've been saying. That's what there's lots of questions about where Omicron came from and how it happened and blah blah blah. They're talking about people with AIDS in Africa, maybe blah blah blah. But for me, the most rational explanation is that given South Africa's high percentage, 75% or 70% of people unvaccinated, that it spread, the Delta or whatever previous strain spread in South Africa, and because there's a high percentage of people unvaccinated, their natural immune systems, their natural immune response to the virus caused it, which is what would have happened last April and May of 2020 if they had not enacted this hysterical, ridiculous response. Natural immunity, as in let it spread throughout the population. People's natural immune systems, which have a broad scale approach to targeting the virus, cause multiple mutations on the virus across the different areas of the virus, and cause it to turn into the common cold, which is because of the coronavirus. That's what would have happened last year if they had not done what they did.
So
And it
unvaccinated South
happened
Africans
finally in
just
South
ended
Africa.
the pandemic,
Basically, yes.
and he knows it, but
He doesn't want to go there. Why? Because he's look at the media and the attention and the adulation he's been having over the past couple of years. You know what I mean? I think he wants to give that up. I think he wants to say, my job here is done. I'm going to step back out of the limelight. He loves it. So he's got every reason to keep it going.
nuts. It's nuts.
Excuse me.
And they want the vaccines keep coming. Oh my God. I mentioned Pfizer. Yeah, of course they're going to say they're doing trials on 2 to 11-year-olds.
Yeah.
2 to 5-year-olds. Which parents are offering their children up for those trials, in which they give them 3 doses at once? Well, I guess over a period of weeks, but God in heaven.
Yeah.
I want to come back to something. Unless you want to stick on the bloody Omicron.
No.
Because I guess we just figured out it's over.
Yeah. Well, we'll see. It's over, but the
at
band's going to make it.
At the level of the science, it is.
Yes, but it has been, level of the science has never been objective throughout this entire situation, It's over, but the band's going to make it, i.e. the government is going to make it keep going.
Maybe we don't want to talk about it. I don't know how big. It's something that caught my eye. Over the years, we talked about Brexit a lot, and you were particularly pushing, I don't think they're actually going to leave the EU. And they did formally, but structurally, they're still very much enmeshed, blah, blah, blah. Well, there's a few things that made me wonder about the bashing Boris is getting.
Mm-hmm.
Perhaps that leaking of lockdown parties at 10 Downing Street was contrived, done
Maybe,
deliberately.
possibly, yeah.
Because now his Brexit minister just quit. Now, this guy is called Lord David Frost.
Yeah.
Lord Frost, top guy for Boris. Boris said, me and him, you can't put a cigarette paper between us, you know. And now he's lost a key ally. He quit. He quit after giving a speech last week in which he paraphrased the famous Bruges speech by Margaret Thatcher, in which he said, we can't carry on as we have before if after Brexit all we do is import the European social model. We have not successfully rolled back the frontiers, that's paraphrasing Thatcher, of the European Union from Britain through Brexit, only to import that European model after all this time. So he's claiming, we're not really separating from Europe. But his other thing was he was totally against more COVID restrictions, specifically the COVID passports. He wanted no new mask rules, no vaccine passports. 2 days later, they had that vote in Parliament. It was passed, and Frost quit. At the same time, last week, there was a by-election in which, the safest ever Tory seat in the UK was lost to a Lib Dem.
But that just speaks to what I was saying about Brexit, that they haven't really disconnected from Brexit at all.
The new Chancellor of Germany, Olaf Scholz, several weeks ago, said that a sovereign Europe, and he goes on to explain, the federalization of the European Union is the key for our new German foreign policy. So I'm wondering how much Britain's COVID policy, in quotes, is actually still the Brexit battle. Anyway, that's just my some thoughts on it, because the British government has incredible way. It's like a chameleon. Even when it's falling apart and in the worst crises ever, what immediately follows just happens to land slap in the middle of the perfect solution as far as the so-called establishment deep state of that country sought. You would imagine, because they end up winning everything. They don't lose anything. There's no popular revolt. There's no leader who comes in and then they have to concede workers' rights, if it was back in that day. or any kind of populist demands of what the most people want, they always land on their feet. So I'm thinking, even with this crisis in Britain, they're probably going to land on their feet. And it may be something like they think getting Britain into a crisis that actually gets them back into Europe.
Yeah.
Formally.
Well, I think they haven't really, like I said, they never really left. Well, formally, yeah, but they never really left. It was informally, they're still pretty much tied at the, joined at the hip, joined at the whatever, with the EU. And I mean, that's to keep it all on song, because if you have one country that kind of goes independent and you have some elements within that country who can, I mean, you see this in the US, you know what I mean, where you have Florida and Texas and a few other states who are very much saying no thanks to all the COVID bullshit, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And in Europe, they don't want to have the UK, which for a while there, I was actually saw it as being, there did seem to be a battle going on, and there was a bit too much freedom being allowed within the UK up until this recent Omicron nonsense, you know? So it's all, it's a little insight, or it's a hint at what's going on behind the scenes, and there are people who behind the scenes who have effectively run the British government in Whitehall. The mandarins, as they call them in Whitehall, have done for a long time, who you know want there to be an integrated response. They're the kind of Alex Jones's globalists, right, where it's everybody's on song. I mean, you're getting into kind of one world government kind of territory here. Yeah. But there's you know, that's not a crazy conspiracy theory. There's evidence for clearly of there being
not least the last 2 years. Yeah,
exactly, a top level kind of group of people in different areas of human domains, basically, of human activity, who direct things, you know, and who pass down advice to governments and that kind of stuff, you know. So, yeah, I think they don't want the UK, and never wanted the UK to be sitting off the shores of the European continent and to be doing its own thing, because that then has influence on other people in the continent. So they want a blanket policy that applies to everybody, that everybody follows, you know. Yeah. And you notice that if any one country goes kind of quiet and something happens in that respect, there's a little bit too much independence, you don't hear about it anymore. I mean, I haven't looked for it, but I don't look for things unless I'm particularly interested in them. But I just scan the news and see if I can see what's popping up, what's being talked about by the media, because the media is a good read on what the government and whoever else wants people to know. And I haven't heard anything about Spain in months now. Right. We talked about this in a previous show, where effectively the governor of Madrid has for you know, earlier this year, she basically said, listen, it's done. We're not doing this bullshit anymore. We're not locking down businesses. Took the same approach as DeSantis in Florida, basically. And because that was in Madrid, it had an effect on the rest of the country. And you don't hear anything right now in the media about Spain and about COVID restrictions, anything. Apparently it's all cool down there, you know.
Right.
So it's,
and that won't be the end of the story. There'll be background battles to get her
for sure.
out.
And if she gets booted, then it'll come back on. There'll be an uptick in
cases,
massive spread of Omicron or whatever. Omega. Apparently, Omega is going to be the next variant. They've even set it up. They just jumped to Omega.
They better not go to Omega, because they can't go after that.
That'll be a good one. Well, yeah, that might be the last hurrah of
all
COVID.
In there.
Yeah, before the economy collapses.
That would be a nice segue.
Yeah. Omega did it.
Omega did it.
Well, the Omega variant would be the one to push the economy over the edge, right? Not governments, mind you, just the virus. The virus will destroy the global economy, because that's how sneaky this virus is. It's not just after humans; it wants the destruction of the economy.
On that note, Scotty, could you put this up? The headline in British paper last week. No matter what sensible things they say here and there, this is what people are being fed all the time.
Ooh.
Sunday Express, held hostage by the virus, in massive caps.
Who was held hostage by the virus? Is the virus the government?
I think the government. No. The implicated. Yes, that's what it is. But what's implied here is that the government is being held hostage by the virus. I.e., Boris and co. have no choice but to do what they did last week.
Okay,
and propose more
poor
lockdowns,
government.
circuit breakers, blah blah blah, vax mandates, and all the rest of it.
Somebody's being held hostage by someone.
Definitely.
But it's not. I don't think it's that interpretation of it. If that's what they wanted to convey, it's obviously just replace add the people held hostage by the government. The virus is the government at this point. It's a deadly virus. And there's no vaccine to it. Well, there's a vaccine to it.
There is.
Knowledge. Responsibility. Stop believing the bullshit. Do your own research. Grow up here. Stand up. Become the independent human that you were meant to be.
Well said. I shouldn't laugh. But again, I'm thinking back to what I said at the start. There are just some people.
Oh, yeah, I'm not going to go there. Of course, you could say that to them from now to eternity, till the cows come home. But it's not going to make any difference because they can't do it. So, and again, that'll sow division. People talking about this is what the government has done. This is sown division in society. You see people shouting at each other over vaccines and masks and stuff. Yeah, the government has stoked that and has created a situation where those fracture lines in society that have remained, hidden and, not a problem for so long, they've exacerbated them and brought them to the fore. But that fundamental division between human beings is essential. It's down to the individual nature of each individual person. And like we've said in previous shows, we know who the adults in the room are. It's the ones who are standing up and taking responsibility for their own health and their own understanding of the world and navigating themselves. And the children in the room are the ones who are saying, Fauci, what'll I do today?
Well,
Daddy Fauci,
I want to look at
how many masks should I wear?
I want to look at the next item. Let's have a look at what anyone has a bit of common sense knew those adult children were going to do to their actual children if they put them through the last 2 years. This is from the British Medical Journal this week. COVID-19, children born during the pandemic score lower on cognitive tests. Study finds. It's horrifying.
Children born during the pandemic score markedly lower on standard measures of verbal, motor, and overall cognitive ability. Well, no shit. Like, they've been kept out of school. They've had their faces covered. They've been looking at their parents and everybody around them with.
It's only based on a cohort of kids from Rhode Island, so one U.S. state. But they're using scales and indices that have been used for decades. According to the first report, this first study. Probably not the first. It hasn't been. This is like a pre-study, it's pre-publication. It hasn't actually been peer-reviewed for yet, but it's not looking good. So, the cohort of study they did with 672 children born since the pandemic, in quotes, started. Their average IQ score has dropped 22 points.
Well.
The researchers ruled out a direct effect of the virus because mothers or children with a history of testing positive for COVID-19 were excluded from the analysis. Instead, reduced interaction with parents and less outdoor exercise are likely culprits, along with effects that occur during pregnancy. To underscore that, they show the contrast between 2019, the year pre-pandemic, and 2020. Children born in 2019 did not experience a decline in development scores.
I wonder why. This is all stuff that's going to come out in the wash. That's just one example of a lot of other things that are going to come out in the wash. And you know what? There'll be nobody to blame for it. And we'll be in that situation.
You said 2020 was bad, but 2021 was worse.
Yeah.
And the effect is larger in boys than in girls.
Yeah, for sure.
Poverty is not. They also factor in that. It doesn't matter your social status. It's up and
Across
down
the board,
the social status. It's to do with the direct developmental requirements of facial contact, tactile touch, and so on. He made the comparison at the end, the head of the study. He said, the closest thing we have seen in other research to this, and this is horrible, he says, not a good comparison to be making, is the studies that were done of orphans in Romania. The effects of institutionalization and lack of interaction on them were profound. But what we're seeing here is on a par with that. I mean,
you can lose faith in humanity.
that's what they're doing to their own kids.
Yeah.
In the millions, in the hundreds of millions.
Because of their reliance on corrupt authority that they believe to be a benevolent authority, despite all of the evidence. And they won't believe that it's a corrupt authority because they can't believe it's a corrupt authority because something essential within them stops them from being able to do that, because they basically stating to the universe that they're no good on their own. They can't cope on their own. They need a strong authoritative structure in their life, especially when there's some kind of a crisis. And if someone comes along and manufactures that crisis and inflates it, and they have control over the propaganda streams, the access to people's minds, then they can create whatever crisis they want and have people respond to it in whatever way they want. And like we said, I mean, it's like beating a dead horse at this point. I don't know how many more years people need. And the problem is there's a lot of people out there who no amount of years will ever get them to the point that they understand it. At least not while things are taken over. The only thing that happens is that this level of corruption continues, and these people playing their part in it, or they're facilitating the whole thing comes crashing down. It collapses under the weight of its own hubris and bullshit and lies, and only then do people start to wake up. But they don't even wake up then. What happens at that point is they just they kind of like stagger out into, some kind of chaotic situation in society, and they have no idea how it happened. How did this happen? You know what I mean? It's like, geez, at that point, there wouldn't be a lot of, I would find it hard to have a lot of sympathy for those people. I will have sympathy for them, but it would be difficult because I want to wring their bloody necks at that point. At that point, it'll have been years of evidence mounting over and over again that there's something not right about this. This is not good for you. It's not good for your society. It's not good for your children. Stop going along with it. And they refuse. Not only did a lot of them refuse, but they actually attack the people trying to tell them that. And the end result is they end up in in deep shit, basically, with all the rest of us, although they're in the worst situation because they have no clue what's going on. Because they haven't been tracking, because they've been listening to little freaking shithead gnomes like Fauci and other similar tosspots. Anyway, Scotty, show us your antlers. The only person apart from our decorations here who's actually in the Christmas spirit, well, Neil is.
Hang on.
Let's go, Brandon. But we know. I did a bit of Google research. There's Scotty's antlers. He is, I don't know,
fantastic.
Well, just fantastic. Yeah.
Very festive.
Festive, absolutely festive. Christmas is all about reindeers and stuff. And I just Googled what that Let's Go Brandon is, and it's not a positive message.
What? It's not?
No, it means fuck Joe Biden. It's a euphemism for fuck Joe Biden.
Oh, is it?
Yeah. Are you happy about that, Neil?
Oh, it kind of actually makes me feel warm inside.
All right, well then, go with it. Whatever works. Yeah, so apart from COVID bullshit...
the transitory inflation.
That's what I'm talking about. That's what's coming. They keep talking about it. It's happening.
It's 7%, they say, the worst since 1980.
Yeah.
Like I said to you before, it's more like 30%.
Yeah, for sure.
Because they changed how they calculate it.
Yeah. They're just... yeah. And they're still in the US, they're still trying to pass that infrastructure bill. 1.23, whatever, more trillion, depends. It's broken up in different ways, but it's trillions of dollars. And...
the triple B. The quadruple B, the Build Back Better bill.
Build Back Better Biden bill. Biden's Build Back Better bill.
Yes, that's 5 B.
So that's going to, there's a lot of problems with it, obviously, and that massive amount of spending, increasing the debt limit in the US. There's a possibility of people talking about it, increasingly talking about the idea of the US not being able to finance its debt, not be able to repay its debt. In fact, they said that they would be able to pay just about a week ago, whatever. The Biden himself said that he signed off on a document saying that, I'm signing this document so that we let everybody know that the US government pays its bills. but in doing that, it had borrowed more to pay those bills.
Right.
So it's like me saying, like, I'm going to pay off my bills by getting another loan. That's not the classic definition of paying back your bills or what you owe, borrowing from someone else, because you're just increasing your debt, right? And in fact, yeah, they're actually increasing it. The debt is mounting, despite the fact that they're paying back some of the interest on their loans, maybe. Anyway, it's not really sustainable. There's a lot of talk about China and Russia developing parallel systems in order to, for example, the SWIFT system. Russia has been on that before. It's on it again with China having talks, Putin and Xi having talks about, kind of cementing or reinforcing their economic ties and setting up a system where they would be invulnerable. Their financial systems would be invulnerable to the US, i.e. that's the whole SWIFT system, where the US has threatened in the past to try and kick Russia out of the SWIFT system, which is an international payment system for all sorts of behind-the-scenes economic stuff. And that's one of the potential sanctions they can impose on Russia, economic sanctions, by curtailing their ability to do international trade and payments and stuff. So, and Russia is concerned about that because of the whole business over Ukraine right now, where there's been a lot of talk, as we mentioned last week, about, at least in the Western media, about Russia going to
invade Ukraine.
Apparently, Biden just said recently that there's a 4-week window for him to stop Russia from invading Ukraine. And at that point, so everybody's talking about January, because they need to do it quickly before it gets really cold. In Ukraine, I would have thought it's pretty cold there already, but whatever. That's the idea, that they have to do it before deep winter sets in. They have to do whatever they're going to do. It's all World War II kind of analogies, essentially. I mean, they're right back. We talk about them talking about Russia as in, like, they're still relating to Russia as if it was the Soviet Union. Well, in terms of this Ukraine business, they've gone back to the Second World War, basically, with all these analogies about troop movements and how to avoid the bad winter weather, and keeping a supply chain, the military supply chain open and stuff, and blah blah blah. But we don't know.
But you
highly
said to me
suspect
that you thought that it's a bit more than just the on-off hot-cold we've had over the last 6 years.
It's worse at this point because the Western powers, particularly the US, seem to feel that they have something over Russia, that they are in a controlling position where they can, like we talked about, where they can, they have complete control over Ukraine and the Ukrainian military, which they've been building up over the past 5 or 6 years to a half-decent army. Probably still not very good, but half decent. Certainly better than it was in 2014 when the whole Kiev coup, or the coup in Ukraine, happened and Russia took Crimea, and then Donbass, the Donetsk and Luhansk regions declared independence, and Russia supported them in doing that and pretty much wiped out any Ukrainian army resistance to that. It's different now. They are probably better, and the US has been building them up over the past number of years, and they feel that they're in a position where they can impose more suffering on the people of Donetsk, and they can maybe, it's the thing is, the the Ukrainian government obviously wants Donetsk back, right? It doesn't want to give it anything. It doesn't want to give it any independence. It wants it back into Ukraine. The people in Donetsk don't want that. They want to be Russia aligned and even have independence or join Russia, whatever, down the line. That's what the Ukraine government wants. And you can understand that from a nationalistic sentiment point of view. We don't want parts of our country breaking away. But tough shit, it was your fault, in a way, for going along, organising the coup, accepting the US backing of the coup. So the Kiev government wants that back, but the US doesn't care about Donetsk. It doesn't care about Donetsk being reincorporated into Ukraine or being given back to Ukraine. It cares about poking the bear and antagonizing Russia, and not just antagonizing it, but antagonizing it to a point where it hopes that it will get it to do something, like maybe invade or start some kind of a small, low level conflict war directly, and then it can kind of blanket the media with all sorts of condemnations and put into place sanctions against Russia on the basis of that, including on Nord Stream, because they've had an assurance from Germany, that if Russia were to do something, cross a red line or whatever in Ukraine, they would shut off Nord Stream for good. So they really feel they have Russia over a barrel in this situation, and they're really trying to turn the screw on it, And that's why I was saying that I was reading a kind of seriousness from the Russian government over this particular episode in Ukraine that was different from previous ones, because
Putin was calling Macron saying, "Can you?"
Yeah, and the Germans as well.
Please stop sending weapons.
Yeah.
He said, "Please stop pumping Ukraine full of weapons." But they're just pouring in.
He was telling Macron
and
the Germans.
US troops are stationed in Western Ukraine.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so it's a difficult situation for the Russians in that situation.
The number 2 of Lavrov, so the deputy foreign minister of Russia, told Sputnik this week that the US's current activities so close to Russia's border, quote, risks escalating to the level seen during the Cuban Missile Crisis in 1962.
Yeah.
So that's how they see it.
Yeah.
So there's a kind of an attempt to corner or to capitalize on whatever they think they have, to capitalize on, we've got the son of a bitch now.
Yeah, yeah. And that's putting a more grim...
Meanwhile, they're conducting air raid siren tests in Kiev all week.
Right.
I don't know. Putin sent a draft treaty to all NATO members saying, basically, look, we need to, something like, we need to agree that you have your red lines and this is our red line. And the Biden administration responded to that and said, Biden actually literally directly said, I don't accept anybody's red lines. You don't give us the red lines, we give you them. And if you go to that kind of brinkmanship, you're naturally going to have, they're going to go to the brink.
Yep. So we'll have to wait and see. I mean, again, they're talking about January. They seem to be putting it off until after the Christmas, New Year period. So we'll have to wait and see what happens, if anything, in January. But it's a difficult situation, and I don't really see anything any other way than for the Russians to. They don't want to. They want to create a situation where, it's resolved to a large extent, primarily for the people in Donetsk, but without looking like they back down. That they backed away. They want to avoid that as much as possible, but they're not going to hang their hat on that. You know what I mean? So it's difficult, and I don't really see any other way, because I don't see them launching any kind of invasion. I could be wrong about that, but I don't see it happening. I just see the US trying to screw them over more and more. And I think what you were mentioning about them, Putin going to France and Germany and saying, listen, that they're trying to use the diplomatic route to try and put pressure on to get an equitable solution to the situation, to calm it down and make everybody go home, and basically just maintain the status quo as it has been for the past 5 or 6 years, where Donetsk is technically independent but not recognized by Kiev, obviously, or the US or anyone else.
Or Moscow, formally.
It
doesn't recognize...
No, it's not recognized it, but it's facilitating its independence effectively. So, and just leave it like that until some point in the future when, like as Lavrov, I think, said, or someone in the Russian government said, that until some point when there might be a US administration who could be more reasonable and we could actually negotiate with, or not, he didn't say in the US, he said in Ukraine.
Yeah.
Until at such point as there's a change in government in Ukraine, but until the US gets the hell out of Ukraine or boots the US, or someone in Ukraine boots the US out of the Ukraine, that's not going to happen. They're going to maintain the kind of government, client, proxy government in Ukraine that they set up in 2014. So it's, it doesn't look good. It's pretty bleak, but I suppose at that point you just say, okay, just put everything on hold and wait and see what happens while the economy crashes. And all other considerations are irrelevant.
If the Russians thought more as long term as the Chinese do, it would be, don't let them bait us over Taiwan in their case.
Just bide your time.
Hold the line, and look at the trajectory. The US is doomed. They're literally trying to fiscally imagine their way out of their debt crisis.
Yep.
Yeah. They probably think they can wait it out and inherit the earth, in quotes, afterwards. But the US is like, no. If we're going down, we're taking every single one of you motherfuckers with us. That seems to be the attitude, you know?
There's the Samson doctrine, the Israeli doctrine. So It's a pretty crazy chaosy type Christmas period. People are trying to carry on as normal, but they're not being allowed to carry on as normal because we're in the new normal, which is very abnormal and dysfunctional, and government likes it that way. People don't. Some people do. I'd say most people don't, but most of the people, the ones who do are happy with it. Most of the people don't like it, but they don't know what to do about it, and there's a small minority who also don't know what to do about it, but at least they're actively thinking about what they should do about it and watching the situation. And
did you see the William Engdahl article about global fertilizer supply?
No.
He's forecasting that 2022 supplies will be halved, 50%. And he bases that on what's actually happened this last few months with the closure of key suppliers of fertilizer on the back of the spike in gas prices. There are many plants that just closed their operations completely. It was just no longer cost effective to run. I mean, there are different reasons. It's complex again. For example, he says the world's top supplier, like to a crazy level, a bit like the way China has domination of rare earth minerals. Belarus dominates potash.
Right.
I'm not sure why, but it does, 90% or something.
Yeah.
Well, its plant can no longer sell its products to the West because of the sanctions.
Right.
Anyway, that's one example he gave, and he's forecasting 50% less available fertilizer to farmers globally, agribusiness.
Which means 50% less crop yield.
Well, he explains in a contextual sense, citing a UN report, but for the development of modern fertilizer, oil-based agri-products and agribusiness,
you'd all be dead.
This would never have happened.
Yeah.
There would he says something like 3.8 billion people wouldn't be alive today. Half the world's population.
Yeah.
But for that. So when you...
Well, it's a good way to get rid of them, no?
When the thing that Rockefeller and all of big oil put in, if they're about to withdraw what they put in, it's like...
Bye-bye to those half the world's population, yeah.
Something like that. It's a terrifying report. And he wasn't trying to be terrifying. He was just listing it off and saying...
But of course, it's not all at once, right? What happens is that when that kind of thing starts to happen, you have mass migration from countries, particularly from poorer countries towards more affluent countries. It's not like everybody just is wiped out because there's 50% reduction in crop yield. You have hunger, and you have a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people. You have governments trying to make up the shortfall, and emergency, deliveries of grain. I think I don't know if I used this analogy before, but we've seen pictures over the years of like government delivering off the back of trucks, sugar and grain and rice or whatever basic commodities to people all chasing the truck down the street. That's something that people should not view as unimaginable for Western countries, in some areas. And certainly it's coming back in a lot of other places around the world that are less well off, let's say, than people in the first world countries, as they call them. But again, also mass migration. People think they've seen problems with migration over the past few years. Ain't seen nothing yet. That's not migration. This is migration.
That's your prediction for 2022?
Yeah.
Mass migration.
So my prediction for 2022 is food bar. It's just going to get a lot worse. And it's going to be different than COVID. But COVID, it'll come on the heels of COVID, and it'll be economic, and there'll be, rumblings, beginnings, startings, and at that point, people can prepare right now with projecting onto that. Well, there's no evidence. The average person in the street doesn't see it that way. They're not kind of like putting food away or anything like that. They're not preparing for that kind of thing. But there will come a time when you'll start to hear the first rumblings of an serious economic problem globally, and at that point you'll still have an opportunity to do it. So you get a second chance if you haven't foreseen it already. But there'll be a lot of people, even in that situation, who the first rumblings they won't do anything. They'll say the government will sort it out. And again, it comes back to dependence on government. Yeah. This emotional dependence on authority and government, and the belief that they are caring for you and that they have your best interests at heart and they'll always be there to sort out your problems is a massive mistake. And these past 2 years have been a first lesson that is a massive mistake, and a lot of people haven't learned it. So then you get the harder lesson. And maybe you learn then. If you don't, then you get a harder one. And eventually it becomes unavoidable to recognize that's been the case. But at that point, for a lot of people, it's like there's nothing to do about it. You've waited way too long.
Become unavoidable. I mean, they face inevitable real-world consequences, but how many of those people
It's
are actually going to die going,
Yeah.
the Omicron?
Yeah, or the unvaccinated. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. It's unavoidable for everybody that there's a serious problem. But again, yeah, a lot of people won't actually ascribe it to put the blame where it lies because they haven't been paying attention as it progressed. That's the way it goes. That's human. That's the way
Human
life
history goes.
cycles on this planet go. Human life cycles go. And there's some people who see it and some people who don't. And it's not an elitist attitude or whatever. It's just stating the fact of the matter. And it's not easy to be among the people who can see these kind of things going, and because you have to suffer through it. A lot of people are living in blissful ignorance in a certain sense, or they just dissociate and say, no, I'm not even, they don't even want to think about it. They don't think about it and they distract themselves with any number of things. They're technically right now having a better time than any of us are. Because we have to watch this happening, and we have to feel frustrated and angry and desperate about the trajectory that it's on, while those people just get to pretend nothing's wrong, everything's fine, this will blow over in a short time, and anyway, the government has our best interests at heart. And it's like, dude, it's like, again, that idea of like wanting to wring people's necks at a point where they least are able to handle their neck being wrung because they're in dire straits, is pretty true. But yeah, anyway, it's the 19th of December.
This is our last show for the year.
It is.
It is.
What's next Sunday? 26th?
26th.
Yeah, no
the day
show
after
next
Christmas.
week. We don't care well, unless something super awesome happens, but it won't. Do you know why? Because over Christmas they've done their lockdown thing wherever they're going to do it. They've told people they can't have Christmas, or they can have Christmas, or they can have a half a Christmas, or a quarter of a Christmas, or whatever it is, and they'll just let that play out until the new year. Although a lot of places are saying no fireworks, no New Year's Eve celebrations, because I don't know, fireworks spread the virus. Anyway, somehow people congregate together.
People congregate.
Looking at the
that's
sky in the cold night air is a perfect super spreader event. Anyway. But yes, so it'll be New Year before we're back again. But that'll be the 26th and 7 is 2nd of January. And if anything's happened over that period of 2 weeks, we'll be on it, obviously. And then we'll be facing into a brave new year, a brave new world, a brave new year of increasing chaos, craziness, madness, silliness, stupidness, corruption, fecklessness, and Fauci, no doubt. Little evil gnome. He's going to get his one day.
We're going to get you a shirt. Or you have one, but we're going to get you another one.
Oh, yeah.
That says that.
Yeah, evil little gnome. Anyway, so yeah, I think we'll leave it there for this year. It's a bit weird to say that, but there's another year gone, another COVID year. Who would ever thought would be in this situation? This was dropped on us last year, you know that? Mm-hmm. Out of nowhere. And people forget because it becomes normalized. But if you think back, it was like there was a sense of shock that this was happening. They from our perspective, that they were doing this.
Not so much for us, but yeah.
Well, but it was quite shocking still. I mean, we knew they had done stuff before or whatever, but this was like they'd gone massive, right? And
yeah.
it was like, whoa, that's pretty freaky. But people have normalized it, People would never have imagined that what has happened over the past 2 years, like 3 years ago, they would never have imagined this could have happened. But here it is, and now you're living in it, and it's been normalized. It's a new reality, and that'll happen again. There'll be other things that right now you could not have imagined happening. We're trying to give you a hint of what the type of things that will happen, so you're slightly less freaked out and shocked by it, because it will be freaky and shocky. But a lot of people.
This is still relatively stable.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah,
compared to what's coming.
Yeah, but it'll be stuff that you won't be able to, never have been able to imagine. Even in the context that we're talking about it, where we give some hints about what is likely to happen and the scenario, how it actually looks and feels. There's no preparing for it, But it does help to have a little bit of advance warning about it, just to mitigate that kind of, oh my God, freak out, what's happening, like lost lambs baying in the night type thing,
Yeah.
So, yeah, but that's what's going down next year, and we'll be here to chart it and go, oh my God, you see what happened, and point out the problems. I mean, at some point it'll become futile, I think, to actually point out the problems anymore, because it'll be like, what's the point of when things are in complete chaos? trying to talk to people and say, you see this chaos that's happening? Let's look back at where it came from. People are like, dude, I'm just dealing with the chaos. I'm not interested where it came from. I don't care anymore. I just need to, keep a handle on things, So maybe it'll come to the point where it'll be just like, we'll just play videos of chaos. Go, yep, there's some more chaos. There's some more chaos. There's increasing chaos. There's even more chaos. And go, wow, that's an interesting show. But yeah, until then, which is 2nd January. Is there anything going on in the chat room?
There's Christmas well wishes.
Yeah.
And to you guys.
Merry Christmas, guys. I hope you have a good one.
Take a break.
Try and be as relaxed and peaceful and happy and joyous as you can over the next couple of weeks, because you're going to need it as a store for what's coming next year. But like I said, we'll be there to keep you abreast of topics of the important stuff. So Merry Xmas, Merry Caesarmas, Merry Christmas, Merry whatever. Have a good one, and thanks for watching, listening, and if you haven't done so, like all the likey things and smash all the buttons, because that's awesome. And thanks for commenting, and thanks for watching, and thanks for listening, and we'll see you next year.
And let's go, Brandon.
Let's go, Brandon. Let's go, Brandon. See ya.
Can't stop the signal now.